Father's Day, a day to honor sacrifice. My son shoved a cheap $15 pair of socks into my hands, the price tag mocking me like a spit on my grave. Meanwhile, his father-in-law flaunts a $10,000 Rolex paid for with my veteran's pension blood money from years of nightmares in Afghanistan. He dared call it a vital expense while I clutched those worthless socks, my heart shredded beyond repair. Every scar I carry, every sleepless night, betrayed for a watch. The pain cuts deeper than any shrapnel, and this is my fight for justice. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, whether it's somewhere beautiful in Canada or anywhere else in this amazing world. The sting of betrayal still burned as I sat in my weathered wooden chair, the Annapolis River glinting through the window of my small home in Annapolis Royal, Nova Scotia. The red maple leaf flag fluttered on the porch, a quiet nod to the country I'd served. I'm Daniel Stewart, a 62-year-old veteran who carried shrapnel in my shoulder from Afghanistan and scars in my heart from losing Margaret, my wife, to cancer 15 years ago. This house, barely 1,200 square feet, holds every memory of raising Ethan alone nights teaching him to fish on the river, summers at Canada Day fairs, his laughter echoing under the maritime sky. I sold my dream of a boat shop, scraping together every cent of my veteran's pension to send him to Dalhousie University. I thought I was building his future, our future. Now, Ethan's a hotshot lawyer in Halifax, 170 kilometers away, living in a world of glass condos and cocktail parties with his wife, Sophie Murray. The boy who once begged me for campfire stories is gone, replaced by a stranger who barely calls. Sophie, sharp-tongued and polished, never misses a chance to flaunt their wealth. Her father, George Murray, a big-shot Halifax businessman, seems to pull Ethan's strings. I kept the house spotless for their Father's Day visit, the scent of pine polish lingering, a habit from Margaret. Old photos lined the mantel, Ethan at 5, grinning by the river, me proud at his graduation. I waited, heart flickering with hope, unaware the socks in that crumpled bag would shatter everything. "Dad, you'll love this," Ethan had said. His voice clipped, eyes darting to Sophie. She smirked, adjusting her designer scarf. Something practical for a vet, right? My chest tightened, but I forced a smile, gripping the gift bag, the tissue paper rough against my calloused hands. The river outside flowed on, indifferent to the storm brewing inside me. The Annapolis River murmured outside my window, its gentle flow a cruel contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I sat on the edge of my old cedar chair, the scent of pine polish heavy in the air, a ritual I'd kept since Margaret's passing. The living room, barely 20 square meters, felt smaller as I waited for Ethan and Sophie to arrive for Father's Day. The red maple leaf flag on the porch snapped in the Nova Scotia breeze, a reminder of the pride I'd carried through my years in Afghanistan. I'd polished the oak mantel, where photos of Ethan's childhood glowed him at 5, rod in hand by the river, at 16, grinning in his graduation cap. Each frame held a piece of my heart, a piece I thought Ethan still cherished. I'd sacrificed everything, my dream of a boat shop, nights battling PTSD to give him a life beyond this small town of Annapolis Royal. Now, 170 kilometers away in Halifax, he lived a life I barely recognized, tied to Sophie and her high society world. The doorbell chimed, sharp and sudden, pulling me from my thoughts. I opened the door, my chest lifting with a flicker of hope. Ethan stood there, his tailored coat out of place against the weathered porch boards. His auburn hair was slicked back, his eyes darting, avoiding mine. Sophie lingered behind, her designer sunglasses perched like a crown, her smirk as sharp as a Halifax winter wind. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," Ethan said, his voice flat, almost rehearsed. He thrust a small gift bag into my hands, the tissue paper crinkled as if stuffed in haste. Sophie's lips curled, her manicured nails adjusting her silk scarf. "Something practical for you, eh?" she said, her tone dripping with condescension, as if I were just some old vet who didn't know better. I forced a smile, my fingers brushing the rough tissue. "Thanks, you two," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I sat back on the cedar chair, their eyes on me. Ethan's impatient, Sophie's faintly amused, like I was a sideshow at a county fair. The bag felt light, almost empty. I reached in, pulling out a pair of gray socks, the kind you'd grab from a Sobeys clearance bin. The price tag dangled, $15 scrawled in bold, a taunt that pierced deeper than any shrapnel. My chest tightened, a familiar ache from nights when the memories of Kandahar kept me awake. "Socks," I said, holding them up, my tone neutral despite the storm inside. "Always need these." Ethan's laugh was high, brittle, like ice cracking on the river. "Exactly, Dad. You're a practical guy, right? No need for fancy stuff." Sophie leaned against the doorframe, her sunglasses glinting. "Yeah, Daniel, you're all about the simple life. Not like George, eh? He's got a taste for the finer things." Her words landed like a punch, her casual mention of her father, George Murray, laced with a smugness that made my skin crawl. I folded the socks, my hands trembling slightly, betraying the rage I fought to contain. The photos on the mantel seemed to watch, Margaret's soft eyes judging me. Had I failed her, raising a son who saw me as a relic? "Staying for a coffee?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Ethan checked his phone, his fingers tapping impatiently. "Nah, we've got plans. Dinner with George at his place in Halifax. You know how he loves hosting." Sophie exchanged a glance with him, a flicker of something secrecy, maybe, or triumph. My stomach twisted, but I swallowed it down. "Right," I said, my voice tight. "Safe drive." They were out the door in seconds, their footsteps fading on the gravel path. The house fell silent, the river's murmur now a roar in my ears. I set the socks on the coffee table, their price tag glaring like an accusation. I stood, needing to move, and walked to the kitchen, the gift bag snagging on the counter's edge, tearing like the promises Ethan had broken. The scent of pine polish clung to the air, but it couldn't mask the bitterness rising in me. I'd given him everything, $40,000 a year for Dalhousie, my dreams of sailing the Maritimes, my health worn thin by war, and for what? A $15 insult. The mug in my hand slipped, shattering on the tile floor, the sound sharp as my breaking heart. I stared at the jagged pieces, each one a mirror of my fractured trust. Ethan's words echoed, "You're a practical guy, right?" When had my son stopped seeing me as his father and started prized me as nothing more than a means to an end? The silence in my Annapolis Royal home was deafening after Ethan and Sophie left, their taunting gift of $15 socks sitting like a wound on the coffee table. The Annapolis River flowed outside, its steady hum no match for the chaos in my chest. I paced the kitchen, the shattered mug still in the trash, its jagged edges a mirror of my fractured trust. I'd given Ethan everything, $40,000 a year for Dalhousie, my dream of sailing the Maritimes, my health worn thin by Afghanistan scars. Yet, here I was, clutching a clearance bin insult while Sophie's smug words echoed, "Not like George, eh? He's got a taste for the finer things." I needed a distraction, anything to dull the ache. I grabbed my phone, a reflex from years of checking veteran support group posts on Facebook, and scrolled mindlessly. That's when I saw a post from Sophie's Instagram, time-stamped an hour ago, glowing on my screen like a grenade about to detonate. The photo showed George Murray, her father, grinning at a Halifax restaurant, his wrist adorned with a Rolex that gleamed under the chandelier light. Sophie's caption seared into me, "To the best father-in-law, a gift that matches your class." My breath caught, my blood running cold as I zoomed in. The watch's face was unmistakable, a Rolex Oyster Perpetual, worth thousands. My mind flashed to 3 months earlier, Ethan's voice trembling over the phone. "Dad, I need $10,000. It's for house repairs. Critical stuff." I'd wired the money that day, no questions asked, dipping into my veteran's pension savings, trusting my son. Now, that trust crumbled like the dry leaves outside my window. The socks mocked me from the table. Their $15 tag a cruel contrast to the $10,000 glinting on George's wrist. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, the river's murmur now a roar in my ears. "He lied," I whispered, the words bitter on my tongue. I clicked the photo again, as if the pixels might reveal a mistake, but the truth was undeniable. Ethan had used my money not for repairs, but for a lavish gift to curry favor with George. My heart pounded, each beat a hammer against the years I'd poured into him. I saw Margaret's face in my mind, her gentle eyes from the mantle photos, asking if I'd failed her. The kitchen grew dim, the late afternoon light choked by clouds rolling over Nova Scotia. I needed answers, proof that this betrayal was real. I grabbed my jacket and drove my old pickup 170 kilometers to Halifax, the highway blurring as rage and hurt battled inside me. The city's skyline loomed, all glass and steel, a world apart from my modest home. I pulled into the parking lot of Maritime Jewelers on Barrington Street, the store's sign glowing like a beacon of truth or damnation. Inside, the air was thick with wealth, chandeliers casting prisms on glass cases filled with diamonds. A young clerk, her suit crisp, approached with a practiced smile. "Looking for something special, sir?" she asked, her eyes flickering over my scuffed boots and faded jacket. I didn't belong here, and she knew it. But Ethan had walked these polished floors, spending my money. "I need information," I said, my voice low but steady, pulling a screenshot of Sophie's post from my pocket. "This watch. Was it bought here?" I unfolded the paper, the Rolex's image stark against the white. The clerk's eyes widened, a spark of recognition. "Let me check with our manager," she said, disappearing behind a velvet curtain. The store's silence pressed against me, broken only by the faint tick of a display clock, each second a reminder of time slipping away. The manager, a balding man named Mr. Kessler, emerged, holding the screenshot. "This is a Rolex Oyster Perpetual," he said, his tone cautious. "We sold one in March, $10,200 with tax." My stomach churned. "Was it bought with this card?" I slid my credit card statement across the counter, the $10,000 charge circled in red. Kessler tapped at a tablet, then nodded. "Matches. Paid in full, the 10th of March. A young man, with a woman. Said it was for a family member." His words landed like a fist, each one confirming the betrayal. Ethan and Sophie, not fixing a house, but buying a trophy for George. "Is it real?" I asked, my voice a growl. Kessler raised an eyebrow. "Absolutely. We don't deal in fakes." I folded the statement, my hand steady now, the trembling gone. "No problem," I said, forcing a tight smile. "Just needed to know." I stepped back into the Halifax drizzle, the city's pulse indifferent to the fire in my chest. The screenshot burned in my pocket, proof of Ethan's lie. The river, the photos, the socks all faded against the glint of that Rolex. Something inside me snapped, not loud, but quiet, like a lock sliding into place. Ethan had called me practical, but he'd learn I wasn't the fool he thought. The Halifax drizzle clung to my jacket as I drove the 170 kilometers back to Annapolis Royal. The Rolex's glint burned into my retinas, a symbol of Ethan's betrayal. My old pickup's wipers thumped rhythmically, a hollow echo of my pulse. The confirmation from Maritime Jewelers, $10,200, paid with my veteran's pension, sat heavy in my pocket, a folded credit card statement now as damning as a court verdict. The Annapolis River came into view, its dark waters churning under the Nova Scotia sky, mirroring the turmoil in my chest. I pulled into my gravel driveway, the red maple leaf flag drooping in the rain, as if mourning the trust I'd lost. The $15 socks still lay on the coffee table, their price tag a silent accusation beside the mantle photos of Ethan's childhood. But the house felt emptier now, its 1,200 square feet swallowing me whole. I sank into the cedar chair, the scent of pine polish faint, a ghost of Margaret's care. My hands shook as I opened a locked drawer in the corner cabinet, revealing a small wooden box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were relics of Afghanistan, a tarnished service medal, a faded photo of my platoon, and a letter from Margaret, its edges worn from countless readings. "You're my hero, Daniel," she'd written before her cancer diagnosis. "Give Ethan the world." I'd tried. I'd sold my dream of a boat shop, worked double shifts through PTSD nightmares, and wired $10,000 for Ethan's house repairs, only to see it glitter on George Murray's wrist. The pain was a blade, sharper than any shrapnel still lodged in my shoulder. I clutched the metal, its cold metal grounding me, and whispered, "Did I fail you, Margaret?" The silence answered, louder than the river outside. Memories of Kandahar flooded back, dust choking my lungs, the crack of gunfire, the weight of a fallen comrade in my arms. I'd survived that hell to build a life for Ethan, to keep Margaret's promise. But now, at 62, I sat alone, betrayed by the boy I'd carried through her funeral, the boy who'd promised at her grave to make us proud. "You're a practical guy, right?" Ethan's words from Father's Day sliced through me, each syllable a reminder of how he'd reduced me to a $15 afterthought. I stood, the box trembling in my hands, and walked to the spare room, a shrine to my service. A faded Canadian Forces jacket hung on the wall, its patches frayed. I traced the stitching, remembering nights when PTSD woke me, sweating, Margaret's voice soothing me back to sleep. After she died, I'd poured my strength into Ethan, $40,000 a year for Dalhousie, every cent a brick in his future. Was it all for nothing? I muttered, my voice cracking. The room's single window framed the river, its flow relentless, indifferent to my unraveling. I saw Ethan at 6, splashing in those waters, laughing as I taught him to cast a line. That boy was gone, replaced by a stranger who lied for a Rolex. My phone buzzed, shattering the quiet. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, his first call since Father's Day. I stared, my thumb hovering, heart pounding like mortars in the desert. "What do you want now?" I growled, letting it ring. The voicemail pinged, his voice spilling out. "Dad, call me back. We need to talk. It's important." His tone was urgent, but I heard the edge of panic, as if he knew I'd seen Sophie's post. I set the phone down, the metal still in my hand, its weight anchoring me to a truth he couldn't dodge. The rain intensified, drumming the roof like a war march, each drop fueling the fire in my chest. I returned to the living room, the photos on the mantel now strangers. Ethan's graduation smile mocked me, a lie captured in time. I'd fought for him, for Margaret, for Canada, but who fought for me? The box of relics sat open, the letter's ink blurred by a tear I hadn't felt fall. "I gave you the world, Ethan," I said, my voice a rasp. And you gave me socks. The river roared outside, its current pulling me toward a reckoning. The Rolex wasn't just a watch, it was my dignity, stolen. I closed the box, the click final, like a rifle bolt. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a desecration of every sacrifice I'd made. I wasn't done fighting. The rain had stopped, but the weight of Ethan's betrayal clung to me like damp Nova Scotia fog as I sat in my Annapolis Royal home, the wooden box of war relics still open on the table. The $15 socks mocked me from the coffee table, their price tag a silent indictment beside the faded photo of Margaret and Ethan on the mantel. My phone, still glowing with Ethan's panicked voicemail, "Dad, call me back. It's important," sat untouched. Its screen a battlefield I wasn't ready to face. The Annapolis River flowed outside, its current steady, but inside, my resolve hardened like the shrapnel scars on my shoulder. I'd survived Afghanistan, carried Margaret's memory through cancer, and poured $40,000 a year into Ethan's Dalhousie degree. I wouldn't let him trample my dignity with a $10,000 Rolex for George Murray. The time for silence was over. I grabbed my keys and drove the 2 kilometers to the local Scotiabank branch in Annapolis Royal. The credit card statement crumpled in my pocket, its $10,200 charge circled in red. The bank's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the marble counter. My boots scuffed the floor, a stark contrast to the polished shoes of the clerk, a young woman with a clipped maritime accent. "I need to remove a secondary user from my account," I said, sliding the statement across. "Ethan Stewart. Effective immediately." My voice was steady, but my pulse raced like a mortar barrage. The clerk hesitated, glancing at my weathered jacket. "You're sure, sir? This will block their access completely." I nodded, my jaw tight. "That's the point." She typed, her fingers clicking like the rifle bolts I once knew. "It's done," she said, handing me a confirmation slip. "Ethan Stewart no longer has access. He'll be notified within the hour." The paper felt like a medal, a small victory in a war I hadn't chosen. "Thanks," I said, folding it carefully, the act grounding me. Blocking Ethan's card wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming the respect he'd discarded with those socks. As I stepped into the cool Annapolis air, the red maple leaf flag across the street snapped in the breeze, a reminder of the duty I'd always upheld. Back home, I needed guidance. A friend from the local Veterans Hall had mentioned Laura Bennett, a Halifax lawyer and former Canadian Forces captain who understood the scars we carried. I dialed her number, my hand steady now. "Daniel Stewart?" Laura's voice was crisp, warm, like a campfire cutting through a maritime night. "Heard you might need help. What's going on?" I recounted the Rolex, the socks, Ethan's lie about house repairs. "He used my pension, Laura, $10,000. I trusted him." Her silence was brief, thoughtful. "That's theft, Daniel. You've got rights. Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office in Halifax. Bring everything, statements, screenshots." Her confidence was a lifeline, her shared veterans bond a spark of hope. The next morning, I drove the 170 kilometers to Halifax, the city's skyline gleaming under a gray sky. Laura's office, tucked in a modest brick building on Spring Garden Road, smelled of coffee and old books. She sat across from me, her gray blazer slightly wrinkled, her eyes sharp with a soldier's focus. "Let's see it," she said, gesturing to the folder I'd brought. I spread out the credit card statement, Sophie's Instagram post, and Maritime Jeweler's receipt. "Ethan's been spending your money like it's his," Laura said, her voice edged with disgust. "We'll start with the bank, freeze any further access, and build a case. You're not just a dad, Daniel, you're a veteran who's earned better." Her words hit hard, rekindling the pride I'd buried under Ethan's betrayal. My phone buzzed as we spoke, Ethan's name flashing again, his third call today. I let it ring, the vibration a faint echo of my resolve. "Answer it," Laura urged, leaning forward. "Let's hear him out." I pressed the speaker button, Ethan's voice spilling out, sharp and frantic. "Dad, what the hell? My cards declined. Fix this now." His audacity ignited a fire in me. "Fix it?" I said, my voice low, controlled, but laced with years of suppressed rage. "You spent $10,000 of my pension on a watch for George. You lied about house repairs. Explain that, Ethan." Silence stretched, his breathing uneven. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he snapped. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "It was a gift. George deserves it. You wouldn't get it." "Deserves it?" I shot back, my grip tightening on the phone. "I survived Kandahar for you. I gave up everything. And you give me socks?" Laura's eyes met mine, her nod urging me on. "You're done using me," I said, the words ablade. "Live with your choices." I ended the call, the click final, like a door slamming shut. The office felt warmer now, Laura's presence a shield. "You did good, Daniel," she said, a faint smile breaking through. "He's scared. That's a start. Now, let's make sure he learns." Outside, Halifax's streets hummed. But I felt a new strength, a veteran's resolve to fight not just for my money, but for the man I'd forgotten I was. The Halifax skyline loomed gray and unyielding as I stepped out of Laura Bennett's office, the echo of Ethan's frantic voice, "Fix this now," still ringing in my ears from our phone call. The $10,000 Rolex, bought with my veteran's pension, was no longer just a betrayal. It was a theft I'd vowed to confront. Back in Annapolis Royal, the Annapolis River flowed steady, but my resolve surged like a maritime storm. Laura's words, sharp as a bayonet, fueled me. "We'll build a case, Daniel. You're not just a dad, you're a veteran who's earned better." I clutched the folder of evidence, credit card statements, Sophie's Instagram post, Maritime Jeweler's receipt, knowing the fight was far from over. Ethan's audacity to demand I fix his declined card had lit a fire in me, one that burned brighter than the nightmares of Kandahar. 2 days later, a letter arrived at my 1200 square foot home, its Halifax Police Service letterhead chilling my blood. Ethan and Sophie had filed a complaint, accusing me of financial abuse for cutting their access to my account. The irony was a blade twisting in my gut, my own son, the boy I'd raised through Margaret's cancer, branding me a villain for protecting what was mine. I drove the 170 kilometers back to Halifax, the folder now a shield, and met Laura at the police station on Gottingen Street. The building's fluorescent lights buzzed like drones, the air thick with burnt coffee and tension. Officer Ryan McLean, a burly man with a skeptical frown, sat across from us, flipping through the complaint. "Mr. Stewart," he said, his Nova Scotia accent clipped. "Your son and daughter-in-law claim you've caused them hardship by restricting family funds. Explain." My hands tightened around the folder, the paper crinkling. "Family funds?" I said, my voice low but edged with steel. "That's my pension, earned in Afghanistan. Ethan stole $10,000 for a Rolex for Sophie's father, George Murray. I cut him off to stop the theft." The word theft hung heavy, a grenade lobbed into the room. Laura leaned forward, her gray blazer sharp against the drab office. "Officer," she said, her voice commanding, "my client acted within his rights. Ethan misrepresented expenses, using Daniel's card without consent. Here's the evidence." She slid the folder across, her movements precise, revealing bank statements, the jeweler's receipt, and a printout of Sophie's post. To the best father-in-law. A gift that matches your class. McLean's frown deepened as he scanned the documents. This says the Rolex was $10,200, he said, glancing at me. You're claiming Ethan lied about the purpose? I nodded, my jaw tight. He said it was for house repairs. Critical, he called it. It was a lie. Laura's hand brushed my arm, a signal to stay calm. Officer, she continued, we've uncovered more. Ethan made another unauthorized charge, $5,000 for a Bahamas vacation, booked through a Halifax travel agency. Here's the receipt. She produced a new document, its numbers glaring. My stomach churned. A vacation? While I'd clutched those $15 socks, Ethan and Sophie had sipped cocktails on a beach, funded by my sacrifices. The room spun slightly, the buzz of the lights a drone in my skull. I saw Ethan at 10, promising at Margaret's grave to make her proud. That boy was a ghost now, replaced by a man who'd bled me dry. McLean leaned back, reassessing. This changes things, he said, closing the folder. We'll need statements from both parties, but these charges look like fraud. Laura's eyes met mine, a flicker of triumph. We're considering pressing charges ourselves, she said, her tone steel. Ethan's complaint is retaliatory. Daniel's protecting what's his. As we left the station, the Halifax air was sharp with salt from the harbor, a reminder of the maritime resilience I'd forgotten I had. In Laura's car, the scent of leather and mint gum cut through my days. They're desperate, she said, starting the engine, her modern wristwatch glinting a contrast to the Rolex's taint. Filing a complaint was a weak move. We've got them cornered. I stared at the city blurring past, the weight of the $5,000 revelation sinking in. A Bahamas trip, I muttered, my voice raw, while I was breaking mugs in my kitchen. Laura glanced at me, her smirk fierce. Ethan's about to learn what a veteran's fight looks like. My phone buzzed, Ethan's name flashing again, his fifth call since the bank cut him off. I ignored it, the vibration a pulse of my anger. Back in Annapolis Royal, I'd face him soon, but not yet. The rivers flow, the flags snap. Laura's resolve, they all pointed to a truth. I wasn't the fool, Ethan thought. The police station's hum faded, replaced by a new rhythm in my chest, a veteran's march toward justice. The Halifax police station's fluorescent hum faded as I stepped into the salty air of Gottingen Street, Laura Bennett's words echoing like a battle cry. We've got them cornered. Ethan's fraudulent $10, 200 Rolex purchase, and the $5,000 Bahamas trip funded by my veteran's pension had been exposed. The Annapolis River, 170 kilometers away, waited for my return, its steady flow a reminder of the strength I'd rediscovered. But the fight wasn't over. Laura's folder of evidence, bank statements, jeweler's receipt, Sophie's damning Instagram post felt like a loaded rifle in my hands, ready to fire. I drove back to Annapolis Royal, the red maple leaf flag on my porch snapping in the evening breeze, a symbol of the duty I'd never abandoned. Yet, a new challenge loomed. George Murray, Sophie's father, had called, his voice gruff on my voicemail. Daniel, we need to talk. Tomorrow, my office in Halifax, 10 a.m. The next morning, I stood in the marble foyer of George's downtown Halifax office, its chandeliers casting cold prisms across polished floors. The air smelled of wealth, a stark contrast to my 1,200 square foot home's pine polish scent. George, a broad-shouldered man in a tailored suit, sat behind a mahogany desk, his face etched with a fury I hadn't expected. A velvet box rested before him, its contents unmistakable. Daniel, he said, his Nova Scotia accent thick, I owe you an apology. He slid the box toward me, revealing the Rolex, its glint a painful reminder of Ethan's betrayal. "I thought this was Ethan's gift," he said, his voice cracking. "He said it was to thank me for supporting their business ventures. I'd never have taken it if I knew it was yours." My hands stayed at my sides, the weight of his words sinking in. "You didn't know," I said, my tone even, though my pulse thundered like artillery. "Ethan lied to us both." George's jaw tightened, his fingers trembling as he closed the box with a snap. "He's been pushing for a stake in my company," he admitted, his eyes dark, dropping hints about investments, calling me family. Now I see it was all a game. The revelation hit like a wave, Ethan's greed deeper than I'd imagined. Laura, standing beside me, her gray blazer sharp, stepped forward. "George, we have evidence," she said, her voice steady as a sniper's aim. "Bank records, Ethan's signature, the jeweler's testimony. He used Daniel's pension without consent." George nodded, pushing the box closer. "Take it, Daniel. It's yours. I'll deal with Ethan and Sophie." His tone carried a promise of consequences, one I believed. I lifted the box, its weight grounding me, a piece of my dignity reclaimed. "I don't want pity," I said, meeting his gaze. "I want what's right." The words were a vow, not just to George, but to Margaret's memory, to the man who'd survived Kandahar. As we left, Laura's hand brushed my arm, a quiet gesture of support. Outside, Halifax's harbor air was crisp, the city's pulse distant but alive. Back in Annapolis Royal, I made a choice. The Rolex, a symbol of Ethan's betrayal, wouldn't sit in my drawer like a wound. I drove to Maritime Jewelers, the same store where Ethan's lie began. The clerk, recognizing me, took the watch, appraising it with a nod. $9,800 after fees, she said, handing me a check. I didn't hesitate. That afternoon, I walked into the Annapolis Valley Veterans Association, a modest office smelling of coffee and hope. The director, a woman with kind eyes, accepted the check, her voice trembling. "This will fund PTSD programs for a year, Mr. Stewart. You're changing lives." Hours later, Ethan appeared on my porch, his face pale, Sophie trailing behind, her usual smirk gone. "Dad, please," he begged, his voice breaking, knees sinking into the wet grass. "We're sorry. George cut us off. We've lost everything." Sophie's eyes were red, her hands clutching her purse. "We didn't mean it," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. I stood in the doorway, the river's murmur behind me, my heart steady. "You stole more than money," I said, my voice cold as a maritime winter. "You stole my trust. Live with that." I closed the door, the latch clicking like a final shot. The check, the Rolex, the truth, they were my victory, not theirs. The Annapolis River shimmered under the late May sun, its ripples catching the light as I walked its banks in Annapolis Royal, the $9,800 check from the Rolex sale tucked safely in my pocket. The red maple leaf flag on my porch fluttered gently, a quiet salute to the battles I'd fought first in Afghanistan, then against Ethan's betrayal. The pain of his $15 socks and the $10,200 Rolex he'd gifted George Murray with my veteran's pension had carved a wound deeper than shrapnel, but today that wound was healing. Donating the money to the Annapolis Valley Veterans Association had turned Ethan's greed into hope for others, for men and women like me who carried scars seen and unseen. I wasn't the fool he'd thought, nor the broken man I'd feared I'd become. Laura Bennett walked beside me, her gray blazer catching the breeze, her presence a steady anchor. "You've done more than take back your dignity, Daniel," she said, her voice warm like a maritime sunset. "You've given others a chance to heal." I nodded, my boots crunching on the gravel path. The river's flow reminded me of Margaret, her gentle strength urging me forward. I'd kept her promise to give Ethan the world, but I'd forgotten to save some for myself. Now, at 62, I was learning. Veterans, fathers, anyone, I said, my voice low but firm. We give everything, but we deserve respect. Never let any one family or not steal your worth. Laura smiled, kicking a pebble into the water, its ripples spreading like my resolve. The riverbank stretched before us, alive with the hum of spring and distant laughter from a Canada Day fair. I felt Margaret's presence, her approval in the breeze. Ethan and Sophie were gone, their pleas unanswered, their lies exposed. I was free not from pain, but from their hold. My phone stayed silent. No more frantic calls from Ethan. The fight was over, and I'd won by choosing myself. If this story touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe to Maple Revenge. Share how you've stood up for your worth. I'd love to hear your story. Let's keep fighting for what matters.